Welcome to the Quantinix YouTube channel. This is Time Travel Podcast, Episode 8.
Philosophical time travel, defining the impossible, the philosophy of time travel.
Exactly. Forget whizzing around in souped-up cars for a bit. Today, we're diving headfirst into the really mind-bending ideas behind time travel.
Yeah, this isn't about the usual sci-fi trope.
Not at all. It's a deep dive into the philosophical rabbit hole. What does time travel even imply about, reality, causality, our existence across time?
Precisely. We're not looking at blueprints for a time machine here.
No.
Instead, we're kind of unpacking what the very concept of time travel forces us to think about philosophically.
Okay.
And for this, we're drawing from that fascinating intersection of metaphysics, so the fundamental nature of reality,
Right.
and epistemology, which is all about knowledge, plus some thought experiments rooted in theoretical physics.
And we're leaning on some specific thinkers.
We are. We'll be looking at key insights from David Lewis's really influential work, The Paradoxes of Time Travel.
Okay, Lou.
And also Joel Hunter's observations on how our philosophical grasp of time travel has evolved alongside our scientific understanding of the cosmos itself.
Interesting. So our mission today, if you're tuning in, is really to wrestle with these core philosophical ideas, these arguments around time travel.
Yeah, figuring out its logical possibilities, those wonderfully twisted paradoxes.
Even if physically hopping into the past remains firmly in the realm of imagination.
Right. It's about the thinking.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Sure.
From that philosophical angle, what's the very first thing we need to get our heads around?
Well, I think the crucial first step is realizing that philosophically, time travel isn't just physical movement through time. It's much deeper.
Deeper how?
It's a puzzle about the nature of time itself. And David Lewis gives us a really helpful starting point here. He makes this distinction between personal time and external time.
Personal time versus external time. Okay, break that down for us.
So think of it like this. Your personal time is the flow of moments you, the traveler, experience, your own watch, basically.
Okay, my subjective experience.
Exactly. External time is the objective, sort of universal timeline, the world's clock.
Right.
And Lewis argues the whole idea of time travel becomes conceptually coherent, like it makes sense in theory once we see that these two timelines can run differently.
Differently, like
Yeah.
out of sync.
Yeah, or even in different directions relative to each other. You might experience, say, a few hours on your trip. But when you arrive, centuries might have passed in external time. Or vice versa, potentially.
Whoa.
So the key insight is your subjective experience of time passing can seriously diverge from the objective flow of time in the universe.
So it's like my own internal clock can get way out of sync with the universe's master clock.
Yeah.
That makes a strange kind of sense, actually.
It does, doesn't it?
Like going into a movie that started an hour ago, my personal viewing time starts then, but the film's external timeline is already way ahead.
That's a really good analogy. And Lewis takes it further. He describes a time traveler not as just, one solid thing moving through time, but as a streak through the manifold of space-time, like a whole composed of different stages or slices located at various times and places.
A streak, like drawing a line across a map that covers both space and time.
Kind of, yeah. Think of maybe a movie reel. Each frame is a time slice of you existing at a specific point in space-time.
Okay.
And the whole reel is the streak, your journey through different moments in external time. This lets us think about the weird idea that different versions of you could exist at multiple points in the objective timeline, all during one trip in your personal experience.
Okay, that is definitely starting to bend my brain a bit.
It's meant to.
Now, here's something interesting. This deep philosophical thinking about time travel.
Yeah.
It feels kind of recent, relatively speaking.
That's a really key point Joel Hunter makes. Serious philosophical work on time travel really gathered steam as our scientific picture of the universe changed.
Ah, so it followed the science.
In a way, yes. As cosmology shifted from Newton's ideas to Einstein's relativity and then into quantum mechanics, our whole conceptual toolkit for thinking about time and space just transformed.
Right, because the science gave us new ways to even imagine how time might work.
Exactly. So this evolution, where philosophy interacts with the latest science, is crucial for understanding where we are now with the philosophy of time travel. It's interdisciplinary.
So it's not just philosophers locked away pondering abstract stuff. They're actually grappling with the scientific picture.
Absolutely. Which brings us to the big question, doesn't it? We've set up the concepts, but is time travel actually possible?
Yeah, the million-dollar question.
And this is where we hit another crucial distinction. logical possibility versus physical possibility.
Okay, what's the difference there?
Lewis argued strongly that time travel is logically possible, meaning we can describe scenarios involving time travel without them immediately collapsing into a logical contradiction.
So the idea itself isn't self-defeating. We can talk about it without talking nonsense.
Basically, yes. The concept holds together logically, at least on paper.
But that doesn't mean it can happen in our world.
Exactly. Lewis himself said, a time travel world, even if possible, might be very unlike our world. Just because the concept is logically sound doesn't guarantee it fits the specific physical laws of our universe.
Okay, so we can imagine it without an immediate logical crash, but that doesn't mean we can, start building the machine tomorrow.
Precisely.
So the real philosophical value here isn't about predicting technology, is it?
Not primarily, no.
It's about what this whole thought experiment reveals about time, about reality.
Exactly. It forces us to examine our deepest assumptions about causality, cause and effect, about identity, are you the same you as you were a minute ago?
Right.
And about the very structure of the temporal world. Whether or not we ever build a time machine, thinking about it teaches us about time.
Which leads to another huge question.
Yeah.
How do our fundamental beliefs about time itself, our metaphysics, influence this whole discussion?
Ah, yes. This gets us into that core debate. Presentism versus eternalism.
Right, the idea that only the present is real versus the idea that all of time exists, sort of, simultaneously.
You've nailed it. Presentism says only the present moment truly exists. The past, gone, just memories. The future, not here yet.
Okay.
Now, that view throws up a pretty big barrier for time travel, especially going backwards.
How so?
Well, the logic is sort of, if only the present is real, then if you leave the present, you arguably cease to exist. And more directly, if the past doesn't exist anymore in any real sense, well, there's simply nowhere, or maybe no when, to travel to.
No destination, like trying to visit a city that was demolished.
Exactly. So the implication is stark. If presentism is true, then time travel is impossible, period. Your whole stance on whether time travel is even conceivable hinges on this fundamental view of time.
That makes perfect sense. If the past is just gone, like a movie I finished watching, I can't physically step back into that movie.
Precisely. But then you have the other side, eternalism, often called the block universe idea.
The block universe, where everything's already laid out.
Kind of, yes. Eternalism proposes that all moments, past, present, future, exist equally. They're all just different coordinates in the four-dimensional space-time fabric.
So time isn't flowing so much as existing all at once.
That's the picture. And that view is much more friendly to time travel, because the past and future are just as real as the present. They are actual destinations.
Ah, okay. So if the past and future are there, like different cities on a map, then traveling to them is just about finding the road on this temporal map.
That's the core idea from the eternalist perspective. You can see how this fundamental disagreement about what time is drastically changes how philosophers even approach the possibility of time travel.
Definitely. Are there attempts to bridge that gap, like presentists trying to allow for time travel?
There are, yes. Some philosophers have tried to find ways to reconcile presentism with time travel, but honestly, the arguments get very complex very quickly. Lots of intricate philosophical footwork involved.
I can imagine. Okay, so we've got the conceptual basics, logical versus physical possibility, these big pictures of time. Now, the really fun stuff, the paradox.
Ah, yes, the paradoxes, the grandfather paradox, that's the classic one, isn't it?
This is the one everyone knows, the one that really twists your brain.
It is, and for good reason. It just so elegantly captures the potential for logical contradiction if you could go back in time.
So the setup,
Yeah.
you go back, you prevent your own grandfather from meeting your grandmother.
Right. And if you succeed, your parent isn't born.
Which means I'm not born.
Exactly. So if you were never born, how did you travel back in time to stop them in the first place?
It's this perfect, inescapable loop. If you succeed, you couldn't have started. If you exist to try, you must fail. It's like a logical knot.
It really feels like one. So how do philosophers like David Lewis try to untangle this? Or can they?
Yeah, what's the philosophical escape hatch?
Well, Lewis, with his typical cleverness, suggests something interesting. He says that in a universe where time travel is possible, actions that would create a paradox might just be prevented from succeeding.
Prevented how? Like a time cop shows up.
Not quite like that. More like the circumstances of that world would subtly conspire against the paradoxical outcome. It's not that it's logically impossible to try, but that the attempt wouldn't ultimately succeed in creating the contradiction.
So I could try to stop my grandparents' meeting, but maybe, I don't know, my time machine breaks down on the way.
Yeah.
Or I cause a distraction that actually makes them meet sooner.
That's the kind of thing Lewis envisions. The universe, in a sense, ensures its own consistency. It's not necessarily a violation of your free will. You still intend and act.
Right.
But the world's circumstances just won't let that specific paradoxical result happen. The timeline stays consistent, maybe through what look like really weird coincidences.
It's like the universe has this built-in consistency-preserving mechanism, a paradox avoidance system.
That's a good way to put it. Which kind of leads us to the scientific perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah, what does physics say about these potential paradoxes?
Well, this is where Stephen Hawking's fascinating idea comes in the chronology protection conjecture.
Ah, I've heard of that.
Hawking basically proposed that there might be some as yet unknown laws of physics that actively prevent the formation of these pathways through space-time closed time-like curves that would allow backward time travel.
Even if Einstein's theories seem to allow them on paper.
Even then, he suggested physics itself might forbid these loops.
He jokingly called it the Chronology Protection Agency.
He did. Like, the universe has its own internal police force, making sure nobody messes up the timeline too badly.
So physics might just have a fundamental rule. No paradoxes allowed.
That's the spirit of the conjecture. It reflects a general discomfort in the scientific community with the kind of logical messes backward time travel could create.
So science is sort of saying, look, the math might allow some weirdness in extreme conditions, but don't count on building a paradox machine.
That's a pretty fair summary of the mainstream view, but things get interesting when you look at quantum physics.
Ooh, how so?
Well, some recent research hints that at the really, really tiny quantum scale, time might behave differently.
That's very high.
There's some theoretical and even experimental work suggesting that quantum systems might, in a sense, evolve along both forward and backward time eras simultaneously. It's tied into quantum superposition.
Whoa, hang on. At the most basic level of reality, time might not be strictly one way.
It's a possibility that's being explored. Now, it's super important to stress, this is quantum scale, tiny particles. It does not mean we're about to see people or, cats popping back and forth through time.
Okay, good clarification. No macroscopic time travel from this.
Right. But it does challenge our everyday classical intuition that time only flows in one direction. It suggests the true nature of time might be way more complex and strange than we experience.
That is genuinely mind-bending.
Wow. Okay, so we've hit metaphysics, physics.
Right.
What about the practicalities? Or maybe the impracticalities. If time travel did happen, how would we even know? This is epistemology, right? The study of knowledge.
Absolutely. This is the epistemology of time travel. It asks,
Yeah.
how could we know? How could we verify it? What counts as evidence?
Yeah. Imagine someone shows up claiming to be from the future.
Yeah.
How do you prove that?
Exactly. What kind of evidence would be convincing?
Yeah.
How do you tell a real time traveler from an incredibly elaborate hoax, or just someone making spookily accurate predictions based on, say, complex modeling?
It feels like almost anything they could offer as proof predicting the lottery, knowing historical details could have been faked or figured out some other way.
That's the core problem. Establishing credible evidence and forming a justified belief in time travel is incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
Even if someone had seemingly undeniable knowledge of the future, proving it came from time travel and not some other weird source is a massive hurdle.
So the conclusion is, even if it were physically possible.
Right. The epistemological barriers proving it, believing it credibly, might just be insurmountable in the real world.
That's often where the discussion ends up, yes.
Yeah.
In any practical sense, those hurdles look enormous.
So even if a gleaming time pod materialized, our first thought would probably be amazing special effects, not actual time travel. Proving it seems almost as hard as doing it.
That's a very astute way to put it. It really highlights the layers of difficulty.
Okay, so as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into the philosophy of it all, what are the big takeaways for you?
For me, it's that even if physical time travel stays science fiction, just thinking about it philosophically is incredibly valuable.
How so?
It forces us to question our most basic assumptions about what time is, how cause and effect really work, what identity means across time, the limits of logic itself.
Yeah, it pushes boundaries.
Definitely. Like Lewis pointed out, just showing time travel is logically possible, even if physically unlikely, is significant. It makes us re-examine time.
And the paradoxes.
The paradoxes are fantastic tools. They reveal these deep tensions in how we understand causality and maybe even free will.
And the presentism versus eternalism thing.
Right. That debate highlights fundamental questions about temporal ontology. What does it mean for something to be in time? It's basic metaphysics.
So really, thinking about time travel is a powerful thought experiment. It helps map the boundaries of reality and possibility.
Exactly. It enriches our understanding, even if we never build that DeLorean. The philosophical value isn't predicting the future of technology. It's the insights we gain about time, existence, causality right now. Even while acknowledging Hawking's point that physics itself might have safeguards.
The Chronology Protection Agency is always watching.
Perhaps, but the logical possibility, explored by philosophers, keeps pushing us to ask fascinating questions. It expands what's possible in thought, if not yet in deed.
Absolutely fascinating stuff. Really gives you a new way to think about something as basic as, well, time.
It certainly does.
Well, thank you for taking us on this mind-bending journey through the philosophy of time travel.
It was my pleasure. Always fascinating to discuss.
So for you listening, we'll leave you with a final thought to chew on. Which bit of this philosophical discussion really grabbed you the most? Was it the fundamental nature of time itself? Presentism? Eternalism? Was it wrestling with those logical paradoxes? Or maybe the question of whether it can ever be physically real?
And maybe more importantly, why does that specific part capture your imagination or challenge your thinking?
Yeah, something to ponder.
Definitely.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into philosophical time travel. Please do like, subscribe, and tune in next time for more adventures on the Time Travel Podcast at the Quantinix YouTube channel.